Hi, drawing feet. We already did drawing hands. So let's do drawing feet. Feet are always a problem for the artist. We all know that hands are a problem, and everybody knows, oh, it's hard to draw hands, but people sort of take feet for granted. A lot of times you can hide them in shoes or hide them behind a little hill like Rob Liefeld used to do. And there's a lot of artists that struggle with feet, but let's go over the basics, and we'll see that there's three big shapes that we use when we draw feet. And once we understand those three shapes, it's going to get a lot easier. But before I get into the shapes, I just want to go from an above view to a worm's eye view. A worm's eye view, in case you haven't heard these terms before, a bird's eye view is the view you get when you're looking down from up above, like a bird flying over. A worm's eye view is the view you'd get if you were a worm crawling on the ground and you had little worm eyes, which only happens in cartoons. But so let's just take the foot from the top view to the worm's eye view, and we'll see how the shape changes, which is going to be very helpful to you. Okay, your basic foot shape seen from the top has a continuous line on that side. It has a line on this side. It comes out. It goes back. Then it comes across like that. That's your basic foot shape. Now, if we put a shoe on it, say they have a little Chinese slipper here, we can see that that's a foot viewed from the top, from the bird's eye view, from standing up above and looking down. That's a foot. Now what happens to this foot as we change the point of view from up above all the way down to the ground? What happens to this foot is that the lower your point of view gets, the more it flattens out, and broadens out. So I'm going to show you how this works. Okay. So here's our bird's eye foot, right? And I may as well keep this handy because I'm going to have to do a lot of erasing. So our next foot would be, have that line. It would come out a little this way. Now we're adding something. We're going out a little that way. We're coming back. We're much more flat across the bottom. Out a little that way. See how we're making a little thing that's like this on the bottom of the foot here. As it flattens out. And then it goes like this. Now, this is first stage of the foot as we bring the point of view down. And let's, just to make this very clear, we're going to black this in. Oh, and since it's a shoe, let's not make it into a Chinese slipper. Let's make it into a patent leather shoe. That way we can put some shine on it there. Okay? Make it shine a little. Okay, so as you take your point of view down, you can see, and as you take your point of view further down, you will eventually get to a point where your foot shape, seen from the front, is this. So your foot shape starts off being this. It gets flatter as you bring your point of view down. You bring your point of view all the way down to where here's a worm's eye view. It's completely flat across the front. It bulges out on this side. It bulges out considerably. And then it goes up, and here's your ankles. Right in there. Okay, ankles. Now, this will be easier to understand why it does this when we look at the three shapes of the foot. Okay, before we get to the three shapes, though, we have to start somewhere. So if you have a leg, let's just say we have an outside line of a leg, and we have an inside line, and this is your basic leg, ends there. Then you have your basic knee, tilts back that way, a little shorter on this side, and then we have a line coming from the middle of the knee, goes down, this line comes out, and then on this side of the line, we come out less, and go down. Here's your basic leg shape, okay? And then your knee is like a badge. It sits right here, and it's got sort of a hood over it. kind of comes down into a V thing underneath. Now, once we have your leg, once you get down to this point, we're going to make an upside down U right here when we start doing our leg. And we're going to be aware of the fact that, is it the outside or the inside? It's the outside ankle, I believe, is a little higher. Check your anatomy books. I'm getting a little confused on this. Yeah, the outside ankle is a little higher and the inside ankle is a little lower. So when we make that U, we can then put in the ankles. It's like a U-joint on a car or something. There's a U right here that the foot comes out of, and there's ankles on either side of it. So here is the U. And just, I mean, if you put your ankles on the equal, that's fine. But just be aware that they're not really equal, that one actually comes down further than the other, and you're good to go. Now, from this U, I'm going to do this bigger in a minute, but let me just do it small and quick first so you can get the idea. From this U, we're going to start with sort of a waterfall down and make it into a wedge. Then we're going to add this part down here, and then we're going to add, this is sort of pointed forward just so you can show, we're going to add the heel part back there. This is a person pointing their toes now. Okay, so let's do that bigger. Once we get down to the U, here it is. That's the U between the ankles. There's an ankle here, and there's an ankle on the other side. Anyways, I'm hesitating. It's funny because I keep blanking out as to which ankle should be higher. But let's just deal with the U and not even deal with the ankles. Okay, you can look that up later. I'll tell you later. Okay, let's just deal with the U. Not happy. I'm not even happy with the U. Okay. Here's the U. Now, what we want to do with that U is we want to come down like this. Okay, and then we want to turn this into a wedge. Okay, here's your first shape of the foot. It's a wedge, and it grows out of where the ankles are. Okay, so here's your first shape of the foot is a wedge. And it's a wedge that flows downhill like a waterfall or like a very steep driveway. Okay, so now once we get that wedge, now we need to broaden it out. Now, if you look at a footprint, most feet prints are going to look like they just have one line on the outside, and then they're going to be kind of shaped like this. So it's going to look like all your changes are on one side. It's going to look like this side is just a continuous line. That's not really true, and when you put pressure on your foot, what happens is it bulges out on this side. When you step down on that foot, or put pressure on it, try squatting on your toes, and then look at your feet. There's my cat Jack looking for attention again. He's right between my legs. So it's going to look like this side doesn't have just as a continuous line, but just bear in mind that this part that bulges out on this side will also bulge out on the other side when you put pressure on it and push down on it. Now, I'm exaggerating a little here, obviously. So, once we get the wedge, then we want to come out and get this part, come out, and then just sort of feel where you think the end of that big toe should be, and then continue that back towards this. And you know, this is, it looks like a ballerina pointing their toe. This is the basic shape, but that's not pointed in the right direction. So that's, the problem is this is not down low enough, so I need to bring this out, bring it here, bring it back like, I'm still not doing enough on that side. Anyways. So I want to do a little more on this side. Okay. When you're drawing feet, you do have to kind of feel your way. You'll draw and you'll think you're putting the line in the right place, and then you draw it and you think, you know, that's not quite right. So there's my corrected front part. And the reason I'm having problems with it is because I didn't make my wedge thick enough. Excuse me, we'll not edit that out. We're not editing you either, Jack. So just relax. There's no editing and no script on any of these videos. Now, once you have this part, you're almost done. All you have to do is come back here and make a heel. And to make the heel, you start out, the heel is a real simple shape. It comes down, and it's wider. But basically think of it like this. Remember how the fabric used to be sewn on the old school tennis shoes, where they'd always have like a stitch line there? If you picture that as your heel, then that will help you get it in the right spot. You can picture that, although of course on your foot that line, that stitch line doesn't exist. Okay, now we got a reasonable facsimile of a foot here shaping up. So let's take the shoe off it and show how we add toes to this. Okay, basically when you look at your toe line, your toes are going to come back around. First of all, your big toe is going to be most of it. Okay, so your big toe is going to be taken up like this much room of this. Okay, we'll put the toenail on it there. A big toe is just like a finger. Remember, a toe is like a finger in the sense that it's narrower on the tip, and then when it gets back towards the joint there, it widens out, okay, and then it's narrower again, okay? So back towards the joint there, it's widening out. There's the toenail, and then it gets narrower underneath. Okay, very unclear. Clean that up a little. And I'm going to take some of this out. Once we have that, then we need to realize that toes are all different. You know, some people's toes are very strange and long, and they go all sorts of weird directions. But basically, for just a made-up average foot that we don't want to look unusual, what we want to do is we want to come across with a line like this, marking that joint line where there's a joint in your toes. And then go 1, 2, 3, and this last one will always be a nub, at least from this angle. Now, this is a turn line, so we go to that line, we change direction, go down. Okay, and then we come out. So every toe except the little toe is going to have a change in direction in it. Okay, so see how they all have a joint and they all are going to have a change in direction. Now some people have an extreme change in direction. And notice that where they come from folds back around the foot. It's not a straight line. It's basically a straight line until you get to like this point, and then it starts to radically curve back around that foot. If you look at where your little toe begins, your smallest toe is going to begin much further back than, say, this toe, which is going to begin further forward. Okay, now let's try that again and try and make it better. Okay. Now this time I'm going to ignore, I'm not going to put any sketch lines in there. I'm going to ignore that and just wing it. And try and put this toe in the right place. So this is the toe. Remember what I told you about toenails, or fingernails and toenails, is that if you actually show this little outgrowth, if you actually show that little shape there, it makes it look like you have a cuticle, even though in real life that little bend quite often isn't there. It is much more straight. But it's an optical illusion to make it look like you have a cuticle. So we're going to make this a big toe. I'm going to make it big. I'm going to come underneath, and the ball of the foot is there. And then we're going to make this next toe here. And they should almost, almost meet the big toe. But each one, see, when we put the change in direction in, and then the last one you don't really need a change in direction for the little toe. Then you can see that if you put, if we take the sketch line out, the change in direction is really, more than anything else, the change in direction is what makes it look like a toe. Now I'm exaggerating the change in direction. Most people's aren't going to be that sharp of a bend. But you got to start seeing that change in direction. Because if you don't, if your toes are like this, they don't really look like toes. Especially if you line them up on a straight line. Because remember, that line is going to curve around to the back. Excuse me. So that's the basic idea on that. We're going to do some more to illustrate it better. Hopefully better, maybe worse. We're not going to make any promises. I really started thinking about the foot when I started seeing the cartoon foots that used to be on the pretty girls in the humorous gag cartoons, like in the old Playboy magazines. They would always have, you know, the cartoon hot girl's leg would come down, and then it would just go sharply down like that, and it would have a little thing like this. It would have something at the back like that. Excuse me. It would come down like that, and they would put the extreme thing on there. This is the way the cartoonists used to draw the foot on the pretty girls, except that that would be more in. Now when you break this down, when you look at this, and this is fine to draw a cartoon foot like that if you want to, you know, have a gorgeous babe, you know, cartoon wearing high heels, it's fine. But when you look at this, you can really learn something from this shape, because when you look at this, what you see is you see all three of the big major shapes in action. You see what they do. There's the wedge that comes down from in between. Okay, see the wedge? And here's the part that broadens out. And it's broadening out, and the big toe would be right there. And here's the heel. So let's try that a little bigger and see how, so we can see how these different shapes come together. So here's the U right here, and there's a leg coming down there. Okay, so high heel coming sharply down that wedge, and it's still fat down to here, and then it broadens out. And this part on the bottom is going to kind of be a heart shape, kind of. And if you have a really pointy shoe, it might come to a real heart shape. So this part, like that, and then we have the ankle up here, remember? Ankle right here, and then we add the heel. Now if you're going to have a high heel, this heel part back here has to be substantial, and it has to be relatively, you know, flat on the bottom there so that you can put your weight on it. So, and you have to be aware of your angle. Don't just put it straight down no matter what. Don't put it out here or out there. Be aware of your angle, because if your foot is wearing a high heel and it's this much forward, then obviously that high heel is going to be tucking, you know, back, and you have to look at where are you standing? What are you standing on here? Here's where the ground is, okay? So if the ground is there, if that's what you're standing on, then you can't have this thing go too far, go too deep. See what I'm saying? The length of that is important. Obviously, if the length is too long, it totally doesn't work. But what you have to do is you have to look at where the front of it is. Where the front of it is, and you have to try and visualize backwards how high up. It's not going to be on the same level as this. If you put it on the same level as this, it's going to look wrong. The high heel is only on the same level as the front part of the shoe if you're in hard profile. If you're in a hard profile situation, then and only then do they sit on the same level. Any other situation is going to sit higher. So let's make this into a shoe. And if we were looking for a highlight, light beaming off it, you know, the light might beam off it there. It might, if the light's coming from the other side, you might put a highlight there and up here on the heel, you know. So, and there might be one corresponding. If there's one there, then there should be one here on the strap too, shouldn't there? The nice thing about highlights is you can sort of whack them in by feel. And what I mean by that is if this is a black, shiny leather shoe here, I can just come in here and start filling in the black. and let's say the light is coming from over here. Here's our sun. So the light's coming from over there, so I just start filling in the black. See where the bottom of it is. And as I fill it in, I see spots that can be highlighted. So let's, so the sun is coming from this direction, and we're just going to, you know, feel where those highlights should be. And that's really not a poor one, but you get the idea, is that I don't need to plan these highlights ahead of time. I can put them in. You know, it's kind of a good technique to feel where they're supposed to be based on your gut feeling, and just sort of let them happen. Now that's a poor example. But you get the idea. You just don't try and work out precise highlights. Just play around with the highlights, and you'll get them where you want them eventually. Now let's see. Let's try a couple different kinds of feet before we end this. A running foot, which you may have to do if you're drawing like an action strip. A running foot shows most of the foot. That's your basic running foot shape. You can connect to the leg up here. Most of the foot, see, if the foot was pointed and in the air, we would see the whole foot, like I was saying. But this part is going to do what? This part right here, it's going to flatten out. So if you're touching, if your toe is touching, then this part right here is going to flatten out, and the running foot is going to be a little more like that. Actually, more like the first one is a better example. Let's see, you know, sometimes you get a foot that's sort of half up and half down. I'm trying to think of how to do that. Foot from the side, I should tell you, foot from the side. Let's do a profile foot. Wow, that's a weird looking leg. Alright. Anyways, here's your ankle. So, if your heel is back here, this is a gentle line flowing down like that levels out, okay, comes down. Remember where your wedge is, so up in here it's going to raise. Your heel's going to be down here. And this part in between here is going to be like that. So the foot in profile, and if this is in a shoe, you can put a little heel there, put a little underneath there, and then you just add some details, you know, maybe put a bend right there. You know, and remember, anytime you're dressing something, it needs to have a little extra thickness. You can't have a skin-tight, you know, spray-on latex shoe. Or, you know, I hate to break it to the comic book industry, you also can't have a skin-tight spray-on latex costume. But, you know, one battle at a time, right? We're never going to get rid of the latex muscle definition showing costume, but shoes definitely, you need to not follow the line of the foot and come up and give it some thickness, especially if you have laces on it, and you have, you know, it's good to actually show, if you're drawing a sneaker, it's good to actually show, you know, a little bits of laces coming across there, and put the little circles in, and it just aids the, you know, illusion that it's a sneaker. And then you come in, show what the stitching is. You know, let's just turn this into a sneaker. If we was making this into a sneaker, we got to keep that shape along the bottom. But then what we're going to do with the sneaker is we're going to put a double line here, right? Because that's what the sneakers do. We put a double line there. And then a good way to just show that this is a sneaker is to mark it. Put some lines on there to show that there's a big bumper on the bottom. And then if we follow the stitching here, see how easy we can turn a foot into a sneaker. We need to just have something bulging up here. And we need, like I said, a sneaker would have a stitch line here, you know, and it would, this part with the, I don't know what, I'm not a shoe manufacturer, so I don't know what you call this piece of leather here, but this piece is going to attach there, and then it's going to have probably a stitch line there that comes up in some way. You can totally make up the details on a shoe, and it's fine as long as it looks shoe-like. That's a good thing. Now I will probably think of more things to talk about with feet as we go on and do some different drawings. So I don't want to try and put everything into this. But let's just say that you have a woman's leg here, and let's say it's coming down in sort of a moderate boot here, and now you can see how in simplified lines I'm aware of the three of what I'm doing here. I'm visualizing where this wedge is. Okay, and then I have the heel is the third part, and this part is the big mass at the bottom. Okay, so I'm not trying to make this a perfect foot. I'm just trying to make a point about putting footwear on feet. Okay, so if we have a, you know, kind of moderate heel here, kind of, and let's say it's a boot, okay, and the boot comes out like that. No, maybe not quite like that. The boot comes out, and it's a boot, okay. So here's our boot, right? Woman needs to shave her legs. There we go. Okay. When we're doing something like this, we have to be aware of where the bends are. Now this heel, this ankle is too low, so I'm going to move it up. But, so where would the bends be? Well, there'd be one, I'm going to point to some spots. There's where one is. There's where one is. If you bend the leg forward this way, you're going to get more and more bends in here. Okay, if you bend the leg backwards this way, you're going to get the bends where? Right in there. Okay, if the leg is straightening out, like this one is, and standing upright, those bends, those little wrinkle bends that wrinkle when the leg bends forward or backwards, they don't really disappear. They just sort of relax. So what you're going to want to do to indicate that there's even a tight form-fitting boot is you're going to want to first of all come out a little bit on it. Just in general, come out a little bit on it, and then put some bends in where they would actually go. Like there might be one there. Okay, now we've taken the leg and we put some bends in where they might actually go. Okay, so now what? Now we think, which way does that stuff go? Which way does this go? Well, it goes like this. Okay. These things, they have to fit together in some way. There's the ankle there. So we're seeing both sides of that ankle. So if we have another one here, see, this is very important, and I want you to understand this. You don't necessarily work out the wrinkle before you put that outer bend in the line. Many, many times while drawing something, I will put that outer bend in and then figure out where the wrinkle goes later. I know I want the bend in the fabric to go there. Where the wrinkle goes is much less important than where it bumps the outline. Okay, you get the bump in the outline in the right place and all else is basically forgiven. It doesn't really matter where the wrinkle goes. Okay, so we can connect that like that. But we're going to connect them because we're going to show how everything has to connect to something else. There's another bump there. But see, it doesn't have to go straight across from one bump to another bump. Because if I have a bump here and a bump there, there's no reason why it has to connect in a straightforward way. This could be like this, and this can go up there, and this could peter out, and this can come across like that, and that can go there, and like, you see, I mean, there's all sorts of possibilities. They don't have to go straight across. But now we have some, and always be aware of mass. It's like this line right here. If this is the shoe coming down and this is the ankle meeting it, and I have a bump there, okay, it makes a critical difference when I turn that bump into something, which way I turn that line. Because if I turn it this way, that shows that the fold of the shoe is laying on top of that foot, which is generally wrong. Okay, so if I turn it the other way, that shows that it's going around the mass of the foot, which is generally right in most positions. So it's critically important when you're doing these, which way you turn the line. And you can tell by feeling it out and looking at them which way you turn the line. So then if we have a little extra mass here and we come down and we have these fine bumps here. Now that we get to this point, now let's give it reflective highlight. Okay, so to give it reflective highlight, I'm going to come in and just create, and you know, obviously I would try and work this more if I was actually going to do this as a finished piece of art. But the high spots, the ridges are going to be, you know, they're going to show up as white, you know, and the low spots are going to show up as black. We could have a little highlight there. So across this front, you know, right where it's bulging out, we might have a high spot, and those ridges might be high. This part where it's bulging out, the main thing I want you to get from me doing these high spots is to see that I didn't take time to work them out in advance. That's the main thing I want you to get from that. You don't have to work that stuff out in advance. See how it feels, feel your way through it, and then see. Okay? So I'm going to stop the foot here. I'm going to call Anya, my director, over to give me a cut. And I'm going to be putting some new videos up real soon, so stay tuned for them. And